Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about general information for the brain. So let's not waste any of your time. Let's get right to it. Now, when we're talking general information for the brain, the first thing we want to think about is kind of some directional, and you can see that the rostral, when you see a reference to that, that means we're talking like towards the nose. So if we were to say that the frontal lobe is rostral, we could say the cerebellum is caudal, or we could say the frontal lobe is rostral to the cerebrum. The cerebellum is caudal to the frontal lobe, which means towards the tail. You can see the size of the weight there, and you wouldn't think that. You'd think it'd be more, but the material, but the 3.5 pounds. And matter of fact, there was a television show, late 2000s, in there somewhere. It was a medical drama that was huge at the time, with all the shows was going on, and lawyers too. But anyway, and the title of it was 3 pounds, and it was a reference to a neurosurgeon, kind of like a Doctor Strange type before he became Doctor Strange, as a neurosurgeon. But the typical cases come in, brain surgeries, saving the patients, all that kind of good stuff. So, but that's a reference to the weight of a brain. And the three major portions that this entire series is going to be working around is the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brain stem. Of course, when we say cerebrum, we're really referring to almost the entire upper 2/3, meaning both the frontal and the parental areas, which will have a direct tie into the skull once we start talking about that when we do the bones. But all these areas, not only will we be talking about their structures, but a major portion of the videos will be spent on function. And the function of the brain, is, as you can imagine, is a long list of all the, everything that we do comes from the brain in some point. And one of the challenges you'll have in this unit is linking functions with the areas that they come from. And that's one of the things, after putting all that energy and time into memorizing and remembering these certain areas, one of the things that will happen once we dissect brains is you'll open them up, and we will pin those areas and talk about those areas, but it'll be anticlimactic because there isn't any really thing there that says, oh yeah, here's this. You're going to see color-coded sections of the brain. You're going to see references to each point. But man, when you open it up, you expect to see a lot more. And that's always one of the interesting things each year with students. Alright, so when we're talking cerebrum, we're really talking that upper 2/3, as I mentioned. And one of the obvious things to notice right away is that longitudinal fissure that goes right down the center. And when we do dissect brains with the sheep brains, you can literally put your fingers down into that fissure and pull the brain apart and look at both halves. And once we're done analyzing the outside, we will do that, and it's almost a sound just like pulling, like maybe a cantaloupe apart. There is some sound of the fleshy inside tearing, nothing like what a bone would produce as far as sound, but there is a little bit about that, almost a fruit-like tearing, maybe a peach or whatever. But looking at the different parts along with the fissure, you've got the gyri, the thick folds, almost intestine looking like, and then of course the succuli, the shallow grooves, the part that goes down into there. And then the most interesting part is the corpus callosum, which is a huge part of the brain, and creates that left side affecting the right side affecting the left side stuff, or allows that to happen, I should say. Because at the very bottom of the brain, somewhere in here on the deep inside, is where the corpus callosum is, and these are thick, as it says, they're thick nerve bundles, and it allows the information to pass back and forth. And that's going to be big when it comes to receiving information. That's going to be big when it comes to sending out information. And it's also part of what, as I mentioned, causes that. If one side of the brain gets injured, it affects the kind of the opposite side, kind of a thing. So it plays a part in that. It doesn't necessarily cause that, but it does play a role in that. All right, when we're looking at the cerebellum and the brainstem, again, you can see there in the diagram off to the side over there, that's the lower sections, the cerebellum, right back here in the back of the head. You can almost feel that knob right there at the very, very back. Okay, it's just right in there behind that. That's your cerebellum, and your cerebellum is huge because a lot of the mental processes that your body, that your brain does in order to get your body to do the things it needs to do, are processed through the cerebellum. It's only, as you can see there, it's only a very small part of the overall brain, but a large part of the thinking goes on through the cerebellum, and you can see the numbers there, 10% of the overall volume, but over 50% of the brain neurons are located there. And you can see the brainstem. The brainstem is just right below the major portion, that major front where it dips down into there. The brainstem right above the where it exits out of the skull and down into the spinal cord. That's where your brainstem is. And of course, of those parts, the midbrain is kind of the top part of that, and then the pons, and then the medulla below that. And it's almost like a thigh calf muscle relationship as far as the way it looks. But we'll see a picture of that. But the thing to mention here, because it's going to be brought up a lot in the rest of the videos, is the diencephalon. It's a larger area that contains, as it says there, the thalamus and the hypothalamus, and we'll see a picture of that on the next screen of those two. But those two play a huge role in what goes on in the body and the things that the body does to adapt and to make changes. I mean, the brain sends out the messages, but the action is done by the hypothalamus and the thalamus and the pituitary glands after that. But we'll see all that in the next slide, next screen. All right, and here is that picture, this diagram. In this diagram, this is not something that you will end up memorizing unless we talk about it in class early on in the unit and assign that. But I don't want your initial thoughts to be like, ooh, I got to memorize all that. We might get to that point, but it'll be something that we talk about and discuss. So looking at the brainstem, as I mentioned, the midbrain whip at the top there, and then the pons, the kind of that thick, beefy area, almost like your thigh muscle, and then the medulla oblongata down below there, almost like the calf muscle, a little smaller in size as far as a reference point. But right in the center, in that, you got the big whitish area. That's the corpus callosum, that big circular area around there. It's a lighter color. The outer edge is that kind of that darker peach or pink, whatever you call it, in the whiter area. That's the corpus callosum. Again, that's where the information exchanges sides, goes back and forth between the sides, whether it's coming down from the brain and across and then out, or it's coming up from a sensory across and then up to the brain. But inside of that, is the dicephalon that we just referenced. That houses the hypothalamus and the thalamus that you can see there. If you follow find those words and follow the lines over to the center. And of course down below that, kind of if the center of this brain where the thalamus, the hypothalamus is, then if you look kind of like a 7 o'clock, the pituitary gland hanging down there and kind of a diagonal line. Those three making up a huge portion of the endocrine system, which we will eventually get to, because it does play a huge part in everything that the body has to do to keep everything in homeostasis kind of a mode. Alright, so that's our video for brain general information. When we come back together next time, we're talking about the gray and white matter. We'll see you then.